This is Coach Bill Thompson, who coached baseball at Loudon High School from 1975 to 2014. That adds up to 39 years and 743 wins. Coach Thompson is a member of the Tennessee Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame. His teams made 2 quarterfinal state appearances, a state runner-up, 11 district championships, and 3 region championships. That's a lot of winning. First of all, would you tell us about your background up to the time you began your coaching career?
Well, I'll start my background with the sports related. I guess that's probably what you want. But I did go to Philadelphia for 8 years, then to Loudon High School for 4 years. And during that time, I played a lot of baseball in Sweetwater, Maryville, Knoxville, a lot of different places. And then I went to the University of Tennessee and graduated there. And like I say, I played every summer. I was playing baseball somewhere, traveling around a lot to play, playing in Sweetwater, playing in all various different leagues. And then when I got to Loudon High School, my first year teaching, is when they approached me about starting a baseball team.
Okay. What are your memories growing up in Philadelphia as a boy?
Well, my memories are, of course, it was all revolved around the school and the church. You know, so many memories are revolving around Philadelphia School and Philadelphia First Baptist Church, where I attended. And I guess my fondest memories are in the summer. My group of friends, we would all, we'd gather in the afternoons to play baseball, basketball, football, whatever sport was in season. We'd get up early in the morning and go fishing, 5:30 on some Saturday mornings, I remember. And we would, we just had a good time riding a bicycle all around Philadelphia. And it was just a lot of fun growing up in Philadelphia during that time. There were so many school activities, carnivals, just of course, the basketball games, just everything was just. It was a lot of fun.
Well, who were some of your role models growing up?
Well, of course, my father was definitely my most important role model because he was responsible for getting me involved so much into sports and just life. And, I learned so much from him. And, he's just a great person. And, of course, my grandfather also, I was around him a lot growing up. And, as far as my early days, that would be the ones.
Your father was a pretty good baseball player and then later softball player in his own right. Would you tell us a little bit
about that? My father, he loved baseball. He loved sports. And when he got out of high school, my grandparents gave him the choice of going either to a baseball school in Florida or going to college. And, of course, he wanted to play Major League Baseball. And he went to Joe Strip Baseball School in Orlando, Florida, which was run at the time by Joe Tinker, who was a Hall of Fame baseball player. And he, like I say, he loved playing. And when he left Joe Strip School, Joe Tinker gave him a letter saying that a major league team needs to sign him because he made that big of an impression on Joe Tinker. My father took the letter. He went to some teams. First thing he did, they had to give him a physical. And when they gave him a physical, he had a heart murmur. And at that time, they did not really know how exactly what a heart murmur was or how serious it was or not serious. And so they told him that if he played baseball, if he got on first base, they'd have to get a runner for him. So it wouldn't be a good idea to play baseball because of the heart murmur. Well, of course, he didn't. That stopped all his dreams of playing Major League Baseball. But he played around East Tennessee until he played softball until he was in his early 80s. So he ran a lot of bases and he played a lot of games and he survived all that.
Wow, that's a great story. We'll fast forward now to your first year at Loudon High School in 1974-75 baseball season. The program had been dormant since the late 50s, I think probably 59. Why were you motivated to start this program?
Well, what happened, of course, not many know this, but my first coaching job was the freshman basketball team at Loudon High School. Coach Watson stopped at my house and asked me if I was interested in coaching basketball. Of course, I told him, I would. And so I was coaching basketball. Well, then, around December of 1974, our principal, Mr. Gibson, comes to me and he says that Mr. Headley had told him to try to start a baseball team, and he wanted me to ask me to coach it. So when he asked me that, of course, there wasn't any way that I was not going to do that because of my love for baseball and sports, and something else too, because when I was at Loudon High School, I would have loved to have had a baseball team because we had some real good baseball players and we would have had a good team. And I really, since we didn't have a high school baseball team, I had to travel other places to play. So I wanted to give, all the boys at Loudon High School to be able to play high school baseball. So there wasn't any way that I would not have done that.
But what was the greatest challenge in starting that program?
There was so much. First of all, I remember that first, I was lost. There I was coming out of school, coming out of college, and at early or young age, and all of a sudden I'm told to start a baseball team, start a baseball team. So I had to learn. I had to learn how to make a schedule, just the basic things, how to make a schedule, pick uniforms, how to choose a team, all these things, how to come up with money. I had to do all these things, and so I took it a step at a time. I learned. I guess I had on-the-job training is what I did because, and you learn a lot like that.
Yeah. Well, what were your greatest rewards as the baseball coach at Loudon?
Well, of course, there's a lot of them. My greatest reward is seeing the tradition that's been built at Loudon High School, the baseball tradition, because when we started the team back in 1975, I was given a dozen baseballs and 2 baseball bats and told to start a team. We had no uniforms. We had no tradition. We had, we had a field, a city field, and so, we had to build all that. And my rewards, I guess, is seeing what all has happened since then. You look at the high school field we have now, which is, as far as a public school of our size, there's no field any better than ours. And you look at all that, and the relationships you build with the players and parents through all the years, those are some of the most important ones that you could ever have. And still, all of my players are very important to me. And I've had a lot of people to help me throughout the years, and they're very important to me.
Of the 743 wins, which ones stand out?
Well, it has to be number one. April 1st, 1976, when we beat Oakdale. And it was a 10-inning game, and we scored there in the bottom of the ninth, I think, to beat them, and that was definitely was one. Our first, really the next day, April 2nd, 1975, we beat Kingston, which was our first district win. That definitely would be one there because Kingston had a real strong team and we beat them. And then first district championship, 1984, when we beat Madisonville to win the first district championship that we'd won, and that was important. And of course, we also in 1976 we beat Lenore City, and that was a big win for us too. I guess a lot of the big wins you remember kind of go back to the second year, when we started winning a lot of ball games. Mm-hmm. You remember your losses more than you do your wins, seems like. And so I could pick a bunch of losses that I remember. But But then you can't you can't talk about your most important wins without remembering 2005 when we beat Unicoi County 2-1, which sent us to the state tournament. And that was...
Unicoi had always been a thorn, hadn't it? Very strong.
Unicoi is very strong, yeah. And then, you go back into the regional championships, and the first one in 1996, beating Knoxville Webb. So there's just been a lot of big wins.
You've had some good players, as you said. 2 of those players were drafted. Countless players received college scholarships. But there's 2 players drafted. Were Mike White, drafted in the first round by the Dodgers, and then Aaron Everett, who was drafted by the Padres. What set these 2 players apart from the rest of the players?
Well, first of all, I can say we have had a lot of great players. I mean, a lot of great players and a lot of great boys. And that's been what's made this fun. Mike and Aaron both, of course, Mike, first round draft pick, I think the number 19 pick in the first round of the Major League Draft in 1986. Well, what set him apart, and this, I've told this a lot of times, the first time I ever saw Mike, he was 13 years old, swinging a baseball bat. And he was playing in a Babe Ruth tournament in Loudon. He hit the ball to pitcher, and I knew right then he was different. He wasn't like the rest of the players. You could see that swing. That swing was a God-given swing. Just he was born with that swing, and he almost beat the throw to first base so he could fly. He could run. His build was perfect, tall, lanky, real strong arm. He just had it all. He could hit for power. He could hit for average. And when they draft, they not only draft for ability, they check you out. I was told that they would ask questions about the character and things like that, and before they would draft someone in the first round. And Mike met all their standards, so he was chosen first round, and I still remember the day he was picked first round. Of course, that we had talked to a lot of teams, but we hadn't talked much to the Dodgers, and it surprised me. In fact, it surprised me so much that I knew he was going to get drafted. I didn't know how high, but first round by a team we hadn't talked to, so I made a call to Dodger Stadium right after they called me, and I said, all right, let me confirm something. Your first round pick was Mike White of Loudon High School, correct? And they said yes. So then after that, I went to tell Mike. He was in the gym, and when I told him, it surprised him too. Aaron became a top prospect in between his sophomore and junior year. That's when the speed increased. Aaron was a real good pitcher his freshman and sophomore year. But Aaron did something that Mike wasn't able to do. Aaron went to a lot of these showcases that started in the 2000s, so Aaron had a lot of exposure. And in between his sophomore and junior year, his speed increased so much. He was, by the time he was a senior, he was hitting 90. And any high school pitcher that hits 90 is going to have a good chance to be drafted and possibly play Major League Baseball. Aaron had the perfect size, tall, lanky, and he had a lot of movement on the ball, so which is what they look for. And so, those 2 were drafted. And we've had some others that were close to being drafted, but something would always stop them. There was one thing that kept them from being drafted that they looked for that maybe they didn't have.